16 now? Coming up on 16, so a long time. I've known Kevin as a devoted husband. He's a great father. He's got 2 great kids. I've served in leadership positions with him. He's a great leader. And I always thought of him just as some guy at Microsoft. Now it turns out he's a pretty big shot there. He's a recovering accountant. And I guess the whole thing about him being at Microsoft in a position of authority, but me not realizing it, kind of tells me that he's not defined by his job or his title. He's who he is. And that's plenty enough for me. So, Kevin McCuistion is going to talk to us about clouds.
So I thought when we talk about the cloud, the biggest question you'd have on your mind is why do I care about clouds? And how are they going to help me? Because most presentations I do, the audience wants to know what's in it for me. And at any point that I deviate from what's in it for you, you likely will start to look at your cell phone, start to think about your appointments for the day. So we'll try and stay on that point of like, why do you care? We're starting a series for the next 3 months on technology. And so we're going to talk about technology in our lives and the good and the bad of it and how do we think about it. So this time we're going to talk about the cloud. Next time we'll talk about mobile computing. So my friend Sam here and I will do more of a panel where we can interact about where are phones going. Because Sam's a real developer. He actually writes code. I'm just a business guy. And my job is to help people understand what's going on. But Sam writes apps for phones, and we're going to talk about where are phones going and what are the decisions you have to make about phones. And so we'll have more interactive time. So invite people who kind of want to know next time about what's going on in the whole phone world, because I think it would be a really good time. We'll probably just sit up here in the front and just have more of a discussion. We'll put some things out there for you, but do it more that way. But I thought I'd tee it up by kind of getting into the cloud. So before I do, we talk about technology. When I say cloud computing, pop me some words that come to mind when I say that.
Storage.
Storage, okay.
Remote storage.
Okay, remote storage somewhere else, yeah. What else comes to mind?
Risk.
Risk, yeah. Okay.
Privacy.
Privacy.
Or not.
Other things, yeah. What other things come to mind? Cloud computing.
Fog in my brain on how to make it work.
Yeah. It's kind of unknown, yeah. Those are, go ahead.
Application for rent.
Application for rent, that's interesting. So you see it as more of a kind of a business decision for you. I have something I want and then I can rent that. Those are good. I think those are good versions of it. Some people, when I looked around the internet, because you go around the internet, everybody has opinions. One of the interesting things I found is a lot of people think of the cloud as the internet. For them, it is just another version of the internet. And that's probably not too far from the truth, but it's probably more of an application of the internet versus being the internet itself. And so in March, April, May. In May, we'll have a speaker who is one of the cutting-edge people on the internet who's going to come in, and he's going to talk about where the internet is going. So next time it's mobile phones where they're going, then it's where's the internet going. Boy, I thought I knew some stuff, but not when I sat down with him. I was going, this guy's way over my head on what's going on with that. And I'm super impressed by people who innovate in the cloud. So we're talking about cloud computing and why you care. And let's dig in a little bit. First I'm going to talk about consumers, and then I'm going to talk business. So we're going to talk about how you use it, and then how people actually make money on it. So here's what people say about the cloud. Biggest paradigm shift in 20 years, game changer, just on, pay as you go, tremendous cost cutting. So these are some of the same ideas. This doesn't get into these are the opportunity words, not the negative words that kind of you guys teed up. But as an end consumer, you guys have been using the cloud for quite a while. You've got your Hotmail, your Yahoo Mail, your Google, your Gmail, you've got Bing, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. These are all cloud services, was what we call them, that you digest, that you consume using some device. So really, in the cloud, there are 2 sides to the cloud. There are the services provided, and there are the devices that access those clouds. And everything else is pretty much just the frosting. So applications are a way that users get access to those services in a simple way so that they can actually use them more efficiently or do things they want to do or to have fun. So most of these are very kind of, they're more productivity based. My favorite cloud service is Netflix because I love movies. So I love to go to the cloud and I love to watch the movies. Sometimes I'll download them and sometimes I'll stream them. Sometimes I have a great experience with that. Sometimes I'm saying, right in the middle of the movie, it pauses on me. Anybody had that happen? We're
Yes.
streaming the movie.
I think so.
But that's an example of what we want is we want that service, but we want it now, we want it to work all the time, we want it to be like electricity. We don't want it to go on up and down. And so some of the challenges of the cloud that we'll talk about at the business side is how do you deliver that at the level of consumption that we're seeing right now with all of these different things. And that's my day job. That's the thing I actually do that I get paid for. So that's what's going on. So most of these services are free. I don't know why that picture there, I borrowed somebody's slide. And in return, you are willing to give away something if you don't pay for it, right? So you're willing to give away your email, your advertising, you're willing to be advertised to, and they're trying to get you to buy. The trade-off on this is, I'm always asking myself, do I want to give that information? That was where I think the risk point was a good point about the cloud. Do I actually want this free, or am I willing to pay a little bit to avoid having somebody have access to me, and do I trust them? And you talked about a virus in your body. We have viruses on computers as well. I'm always worried about that. Like, will they come in and just devastate me and wipe me out, and take my money and ruin my computer and take away my entertainment? And so that's the trade-off when you think about how you digest these things. But for now, we have pretty good high reliability service for most of these services. Storage is pretty good to date for most of the things you have. Most of the people have done a good job of that. And it's really all about connecting and sharing and about community in a lot of ways. So Facebook is really, when you look at the Facebook community, good or bad, it's just a way to connect to people. I'm more connected to my high school class now than, like, there were 29 years or 28 years where I had no contact whatsoever with my high school class unless I happened to go to the reunion, which never seemed to be the right time because I was out of the country or went on vacation or something. So now all of a sudden, I know all about these high school folks because we're all on the same kind of Facebook page, and there's stuff I don't want to know about them now that I now know. But there's stuff I like to know as well. It's great to get to see people again. Oh, is that what you're up to? And so when I went to the reunion, I actually had some context for them. I was looking forward to the reunion, to seeing some people, because I had had some connection with them, and it wasn't just going and doing the small talk at the reunion to try and catch up for 15 minutes, and then we'll see you in 10 years, right, when we come back together. Or maybe never, because that's the other thing is, you don't know when you're going to see people again. So those are all parts. So this is the consumer side.
I'll introduce you to
That's pretty painless shopping.
Kevin, just a quick question on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is it going to take 6 years? The technology's probably there now. Is it more the commercial taking that on and hitting a critical mass where that's more the norm? Or what do you think the 6-year is about?
Well, they obviously never want to overpromise. And so the challenge that you face, or two things you face on that. One is the application you've written to get your inventory system tied into your billing system, tied into your employee kind of compensation usually, so that people are incented to actually go do that. And you trust that that data is going to not be spammed or put out there, stolen by competitors. There are a lot of issues people have. And this is what I tend to go in, and I usually talk to CEOs, CIOs of companies, and usually we're talking about what their barrier is. What's the thing that's keeping them from doing, because the technology is all there, like all those apps could be written. I bet you Sam could write any of those apps. But whether or not they have the supply and the technology, and whether or not they're willing to spend that amount of money to get there, because how do they make the profit back on that? If you look at the volume required on it, he's lowering the price to $4.15. He just lost 50 cents that he could have been putting into his infrastructure. How do you make it up? Sometimes you get down to just a penny profit, you can't make it up on volume. There's no amount of transactions that'll make that up. But it's a great question. They're really, the possibilities are there, but a lot of people, it's just what are your blockers? What's keeping you from being able to do it? So on the back end,
Would I
yeah, go ahead.
eventually send my robot in the car to go to the store? The robot goes in and gets the stuff and drives the car back home and parks it in the garage?
Well, there certainly are people who have automated a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
There are electronic cars and things like that. A lot of it is we're really, and this is where, for a lot of people, this is just too much, right? They're just saying that's way too futuristic. I still like my horse versus my car. Back to the horse thing.
Sure.
Horse sounds pretty appealing to me.
Yeah.
And I like to do things I can actually fix. And then you watch, we were talking about at our table, these TV shows that come out like Jericho, Revolution. What happens if all the lights go out? What happens if you lose all the technology?
Yeah.
You become so dependent on that then, what would you do? You'd sit there going.
Yeah.
My son's actually going to Nicaragua in April on a mission trip. We just came back from this cruise. So we're on this cruise boat, and he complained about something on the cruise boat. So we're in the Caribbean on a cruise boat, having every wine to dine like you wouldn't believe, and you're complaining about something. I said, just wait till your trip to Nicaragua, because you're going to go there, your eyes are going to be open. You're going to be working with kids. They don't have much money. They have a lot of joy, even though they don't have a lot of stuff. And you're going to sit there and wonder, what was I doing complaining on that cruise ship?
Yeah.
When that's really what's going on. So in a lot of cases, I think we are there is a question there that we have to all ask ourselves. So on the back end, to your question, on the back end of this, what do businesses have to do to enable these clouds so that we're able to get all this consumption that we want? That's the next question. And so what's happened is we really have gone through an evolution of data, and there are two different approaches that have happened. There used to be every possible model for traditional computing, and then we moved to virtualization, and we started to take all those data centers and you started to have virtual machines, which is instead of the data actually sitting there on your machine, you could create a copy of it that either sat on your machine or could be moved somewhere else. And so we virtualized it. And it's the same idea when the internet first came out. Remember I used to have cables to connect your computer to get stuff off the network? And then we went to something called wireless. And you started thinking, well, I don't need those cables anymore. The same thing's happening on the back end where people are starting to say, I may not need all those connections, all those cables, all that electricity. If I didn't, what could I actually do? What would be the ability? And so the models are changing and they're simplifying, and there's a consolidation that's happening in the industry at a very, very rapid pace. And there's some big, big players that are fighting it out in the ecosystem. Who do you think the three biggest players in the ecosystem are? Maybe four. Amazon,
Microsoft.
Microsoft, Google,
Apple.
Apple, absolutely. Those are the four players. Amazon's really not in the same, Amazon came, you know how Amazon ended up in the cloud business? They had a lot of extra capacity when they built up for their book selling, their online book selling, and they just said, well, we can rent that out to people. And so all of a sudden they ended up in this services business, and now they have this massive business just renting out capacity that they got to, that they originally got to just because they were selling books. So it's interesting how people end up with things. So at the back end of this is really this move toward these clouds, and there are two kinds of clouds we talk about, private and public, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But what's really driving this is three things. One, the ability, companies want to be more agile, they want to be more focused on being able to deliver things the way they want to, and they want, the biggest thing driving the cloud is economics. Cost coming down, because when you can scale more, you can make more profit. And ultimately, what companies get out of this is they get the resources all pooled together, get the opportunity to actually deliver self-service to their users, so you don't have to go say, hey, I need to connect to this application in the company. You just go check a box and get access to that. So the cloud allows you to do that. It's elastic, so you can actually increase or decrease your usage based on rental. You guys talked about renting. So I can actually rent the service when I need it, so I can pay as I go. And then it's usage-based, just when I need it. So I can pay for storage, I can pay for a number of emails, I can pay for a number of applications. And ultimately, what really people want is they want control, and they want the ability to customize it the way they want it. And in the cloud, you can do that. Instead of you going to your server on the back end and saying, oh, I have to go maintain the server, configure it, I now have to add an application on there. In the cloud, that is being controlled centrally, and it doesn't matter which machine has it on there. It's a little bit like the Borg. You guys know Star Trek? Remember the Borg? The big spaceship out there, and the Borg basically aggregated everybody together, and they lost all their identity. What happens is if you go into a cloud data center, none of those machines actually matter. Those are just places where stuff is stored. There's a central panel that's managing that, that's controlling what is put on each of those devices. One of those goes down, it switches to the next one automatically. So you don't have to worry about downtime because of machines going down anymore, unless they all go down. So the revolution or the Jericho scenario, yes, then the cloud would actually go down. So that's what's going on the back end of the cloud and what's really driving this. So when you talk to companies, and this is what my job is, I think I did 125,000 miles last year around the world talking to people about Windows Server, which is a new ability for us to do the cloud. And the main thing that was on their mind was, hey, I'm spending too much stuff on IT maintenance and stuff like that. I've got all these virtual machines now that got created by my company. I can't control them. My systems are way too complex and hard to manage. And I have way too many desktops and now devices, phones, because people are bringing their own devices that are trying to get access to all that. So I'm struggling. Where do I actually put all my workloads? How can I actually save some money? How do I get to the cloud? And ultimately, they have three choices in what they do with the cloud. They can either build it themselves, so big companies, the Boeings and the GEs and those companies, they actually will build it on their own premise. And they'll have their own big data centers for now. That'll probably change in the future. And we call those private clouds. That's my own private cloud, and I give access to all my users, all their devices, all their computers. That's called a private cloud. Or I could go to a service provider, to my telco, AT&T or someone like that, or British Telecom overseas, and I could actually rent that capacity from them. There are a lot of people out there. There's a company called Rackspace that rents out space. I can actually rent that, and they'll protect it, and then I have what's called a service level agreement with them to rent that at a certain level of service delivery, and then they have to pay me penalties if they don't do that. So that's a hosted private cloud. And then there's this thing called the public cloud, and that's what Amazon is providing, Windows Azure from Microsoft. These are places where you can go rent storage and capacity online and run your business that way. And then Office 365 is a friendlier version of that for small businesses to go rent Office applications stored in the cloud. Those are all cloud applications. So that's probably more data than you wanted on the business, but that's what's going on on the backside of that. And ultimately, what they just want is they want the ability to do the apps they want, to manage the system, to virtualize, and to be able to use across platforms. So whether it's Windows or Linux or whatever Apple platform that they have. So our strategy, quite simply, is to do one consistent platform across all of that for Microsoft. This is what we do, and we want to make sure you can do it. We don't care what you develop with Java, .NET. We don't care what you manage with. We don't care what devices, Apple. You know, we're actually not in the game of trying to Android. I'm fine. Whatever you want to do. We're actually moving to more of a services and devices world. Whatever device you have, we want to offer you a cloud service that can deliver that. And this one consistent platform across the cloud has a name that will be familiar to you. What do you think the name of that one consistent platform is? Microsoft, what's the next word you usually think of? Microsoft Windows. It's all Windows. So it's Windows on your, we want to have a similar experience on Windows, whether it's Windows on your server, on your private cloud, Windows Azure, on your public cloud, Windows Phone, Windows 8, it's all Windows. Everything is moving to Windows. And so the cloud is really, when it comes down to it, the cloud, as Microsoft defines it, is the future of Windows. Quite simply. What is Windows? And Windows is just a way for a device, any device, whether it's my device or a business device, to actually get access to resources. That's all that Windows is doing. And then from there you add applications like Office or your phone applications or your games, things like that that you do. So that's that. So now I want to move into a little bit of table talk, and then I'm going to close up. What do you think are the biggest obstacles? We kind of talked about them a little bit, but just some quick table talk of, like, if you were going to pick one thing that you think would keep the cloud from being successful, realistically, like, let's assume that there's something, what do you think the one thing that could undermine and take down the cloud would be? Do that around the tables. What's that?
Security.
Well, we can just do it here. So you think security. Others?
Fear,
Fear.
which goes along with security.
Okay. Others?
My number one thing is, being a little older, not much, is keeping up with this stuff and understanding it.
Yeah.
And you can go to some place, pay $50 an hour for them to tell you, but where's the venue to dumb it down so we can really bridge the gap from where we are to where we're going?
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges that could take down the cloud would be if you lost the ability to control. If you felt the loss of control, that's where the fear kind of comes in, the security. So there's some common things. Other things that what might take down? What do you think, Sam?
Kind of going off some of the media stuff right now with, you see China, us accusing China of hacking and stuff like that. So I think, like, who knows, maybe they can figure a way, North Korea can figure a way to take everything out.
They may be watching this video.
Yeah. Is there a problem with overlapping clouds? I mean, if you got cloud next door and a cloud here, that's used up.
It's a great point, because ultimately, right now, there are 3 of those players that we talked about are fighting it out to win the cloud ecosystem of the future. Microsoft and Google and Apple are fighting it out big time. Google is partnering with Samsung for Android. And so Google and Samsung together, and Samsung is one of our great partners as well. But Samsung's happy to work with anybody. They're probably working with Apple as well. But these 3 players are really trying to win through the phones. They're trying to get those phones. So the reason the Windows Phone is such a big play for Microsoft is because if the Apple and the Android phones are the only 2 phones that are out there, then you start to wonder, well, what's the benefit of a Windows laptop if it doesn't work as well with those phones, right? And so yeah, at some point there will be a standardization, and who will be the players that are leading it, and will you trust them?
Where is that competition right now between the 3 you see? Or is it just really?
Well, right now
neck and neck?
it's Apple and Android, very much so, but the new Windows phones are gaining share pretty rapidly. Now that Nokia has joined Microsoft. Yeah, and they're great phones.
They are.
But Nokia joining gave credibility to the platform, and so now one of the biggest phone players bet their business on Microsoft. So then it was like, hey, this is credible. So now it's HTC and Nokia.
So you guys better not mess up.
Better not. So what I hear from people around the world is three things usually that are obstacles that they think will keep the cloud from happening. I was just in Saudi Arabia twice last year. And Saudi Arabia is the most restrictive of the climates. They will not allow any kingdom data, they call it the kingdom data outside of their sovereign boundaries. So no data sharing. So it's a little bit of the Luddite thing we were talking about, John, a little bit earlier, about the idea that no, it's kingdom property, and yet they work throughout the Gulf with all these other countries, and so I don't know how they actually share data. Maybe they're just handing paper across and making copies like we were talking about. And so ultimately their question, though, is the security thing you brought up, which is really, are we going to get hacked? Can we have protection? Compliance, which is really, is the government going to come after me? And then compatibility, which was your question, Cliff, about will things actually work together? So usually those three things are the things that come up. But I think there's one. And I think that it goes back to what you other folks are talking about. The biggest key to cloud success, I think, is a word you'll know not from the cloud world, but from the regular world, which is trust. I think it all comes down to trust. And ultimately, in my 17 years at Microsoft, when I talk to leaders and I train leaders, the biggest thing we end up always talking about is trust. Do I trust my manager? Do I trust my company? Do I trust my government? Do I trust my wife? Do I trust my husband? Do I trust my parents? Trust is really at the center of everything that we do. And when I see good cultures at Microsoft or elsewhere, in my church and other places, it all comes down to trust. At the center of all of that is whether or not we trust each other. And trust is hard, and sometimes we lose trust, and we have to regain trust, and it takes a lot of work, and it's a huge battle. But at the heart of all of this that we're looking at is really this question of trust. And so I think the biggest thing, if trust got undermined for whatever reason, then the cloud would be doomed. It's not just electricity going off. If people just stop believing in it, then we'd go somewhere else. We'd go to a new model. Might go back to medieval times with have our own castles. So I went back to this idea of trust and clouds. I went to the Bible and looked at various places where the cloud is represented in the Bible. It's fascinating. I just picked 5. There were hundreds of examples where clouds are in the Bible. But here was one of the first ones, which was God saying after the flood, I'm going to put a rainbow out there, and from now on, when I form a cloud over the earth and the rainbow appears in the cloud, I'll remember my covenant. So God is actually remembering his covenant in the Seattle area regularly. And that goes back to Genesis 9. And then here, when God said to Moses, I'm about to come to you in a thick cloud, right, so that people can listen in and trust you completely when I speak with you. That was a way that God represented himself because they couldn't see him directly, so he came in a cloud. And he went before the Israelites as a cloud, and then at night he was a fire because they couldn't see the cloud at night. So that's the cloud. In Job, God's talking to Job, and he says, can you get the attention of the clouds and commission a shower of rain? Can you take charge of the lightning bolts and have them report to you for orders? So that was a little bit of a humbling experience for Job, kind of going, can you do that? Can you manage that? And then in the New Testament, we have really when they were up on the Mount of Transfiguration, the 3 disciples, Moses and Elijah and Jesus were kind of all together there. And it says, and a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud, this is my beloved Son, listen to him. So again, God appearing in a cloud. And then at this last one, John's very active on Skype. I can tell. Yeah. Because we're seeing lots. So he says, but he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. So there's a picture of the end times being clouds as well. So we have clouds back in the beginning. We have clouds through the Old Testament. We have cloud with God representing himself during the time of Jesus. And we have clouds in the future. Clouds are with us for a long time. But at the heart of all of it, there is this question of trust. And so the final word for me is from my favorite verses in the Bible, which are Proverbs 3:5-6. I liked the Message version of it. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. So when things are cloudy, when I'm fearful, when I don't know where things are going to go, I trust God, who is the author of all clouds, and who can control these. Because I think if you were talking to us today, he'd use technological terms rather than the ones he used with Job to say, can you do all of this? You think you can do all these great things, but can you really deliver this level of magnitude? Yeah.
So, we want to start looking for a critical mass of trust with the right people who are respected by others, where the trust, I'm not smart enough to have trust in that, but I may trust someone like you who trusts that.
Yep.
And you have enough people like that,
That's where you get a critical mass, yeah.
Okay, is that how that?
That's how it works, and the biggest battles that we have now, and this is true, you know, I know companies and churches and people all the time are trying to decide, you know, who am I going to trust, who's going to be the vendor that I trust. And really my job at Microsoft is to build trust with our customers. And so that's why they send me all over the world to do that, where I go in and I'm trying to help them demystify, debunk myths. Hey, it's really not as scary as you think. I just had 300 executives from our largest education partners who came in for a global education summit here at Microsoft. And the great thing is most of them come here, so I don't have to travel quite as much as I would. So it's having 300 senior people and telling about the cloud and talking about where things are going. And you'd be fascinated at how much these schools are moving down the path of everything needing to be the cloud with all these devices. And their biggest question to me was, can I trust Microsoft? And the wonderful thing that was happening was, as I talked to them about all these schools and all of these governments who are trusting Microsoft, they began to say, yeah, well, if these guys are trusting you guys, you know, if the Department of Defense is trusting you, if these other folks are trusting you, then I'll trust you. If this school, the biggest school in New York City, they're trusting you, then I will trust you. So really it is all back down to, do the customers that you're working with trust you? And if they do, then I will trust you. It's kind of my whole job, is to build trust with people. It's something I think about all the time. So hopefully that was helpful, kind of context for you on clouds, hopefully not too cloudy. You can go all over the place with tons. And hopefully also useful for you. Next time we'll talk, though, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Sam. I won't talk as much next time, but having more interactive about where things are really going. Because whenever I have lunch with Sam, I'm always like learning, wow, is that, you know, I'm always downloading new apps, or, oh, I didn't know about that, or he's written one, oh, that's a really cool app. And so I'm really looking forward to that next month. So please invite your friends or people who might be interested, and, you know, it'd be great if we could pack the place out next time and have a really good kind of discussion. So great, thanks a lot.
Thank you.